Good morning in our case, or good afternoon, or good night, depending on where you are. My name is Elisabeth Veld, and I welcome you to this talk for the Donor Research Network's Week of Talks. Thank you so much for the invitation to talk about our research study and about the development of AINAR. And AINAR stands for Artificial Intelligence for Needle Anxiety Reduction. And as you might gather, we are developing an app that will help people with their needle fear and vasovagal reactions. Now, before I tell you more about that, I would like to introduce myself and my team. So this all started together with our PhD student, Judith Rudekaite. And both Judith and I have a background in cognitive neuroscience. Judith additionally has a master's degree in artificial intelligence, which she got from the department that we work at right now, which is the Department of Cognitive Science and Artificial Intelligence at Tilburg University. And in addition, we work very closely together with Sanquin, the Dutch blood bank, where we are affiliated with the Donor Studies group at the Department of Donor Medicine Research. And actually, AINAR has a very recent new addition, and her name is Cindy van Goor. Now, Cindy is not a scientist, but she has a very extensive background in healthcare, starting out as a nurse, growing to be the head of department of two major wards in hospital. And since then has become quite proficient in leading projects having to do with implementing innovations in healthcare. So yeah, we together are AINAR. And the idea for AINAR started back in 2016 when I started working at the blood bank as a postdoctoral researcher. And the first thing I did was to join a blood collection center just for a few days. I must admit I was not a donor at the time. I am now, and I thought it must be nice and insightful to spend a few days there, talk to donors, see what happened and what type of experiences or ideas these donors could share with me. I was very interested in why people would go to a blood bank to go through all that hassle and to donate blood or plasma, and this all to help a stranger. And well, I think this is a scene that is familiar to most of you. And during those days, I met people who told me about their experiences having to do with that they were anxious, that they were not looking forward to the needle injection, but that they were so driven to donate blood and to do such a good thing for someone that they really tried to persevere. And this is also where I found out that people can actually faint when they see needles and blood. So of course I was familiar with the idea that people could faint after having lost a pint of blood, but seeing people sometimes even faint at the donor physician after the hemoglobin measurement, that was quite news for me. And when I talked to donors about this, I heard them describe physical sensations, saying, oh, I got flushed, I got heart palpitations, I'm nervous. Suddenly I felt like I couldn't hear anything anymore. And this really triggered my interest in this problem, as I know it has for many of you there as well. And now, interestingly, ever since I studied this problem, I see so many references in the popular media having to do with fainting or needle fear. It is in almost every show I watch. And it makes it really clear that this is a problem not only for donors, but for a lot of people. And by the way, in the bottom right, you will see a red button saying trigger warning. So I made the mistake once of not telling people that there might actually be images of needles. And actually, as I say this, I hope that this drawing of a needle is not a problem. But if this is problematic for you, please take care that on the next slide, after a trigger warning, there might be an image of needles. But I've tried to minimize them as much as possible. So, of course, I don't only get my knowledge from popular media. I also decided to look into the literature, and there I found quite a lot of research, actually mostly having to do with immunizations, by the way, that needle fear is quite a prevalent problem. So a recent study by McLennan in 2019, it's a big meta-analysis, showed that the prevalence ranges from 20 to 50%, also depending on the age of the participants. And actually, in my own research, I keep finding this same percentage again. And usually, if this is a live talk, I would ask people to poll if they're scared of needles or not. And usually, we end up around this percentage as well. However, the problem is a lot more prevalent in children. And actually, we recently did a little study here at Tilburg University, and we asked people about not only their needle fear, which was again around 35%, but we also asked them about their vasovagal reactions. And as you can see, by the blue bars are males and the pink bars are females. It's only 30 and 40% of the people who have not ever experienced vasovagal reactions, and there are many people who experience more than one at the same time. Now, of course, and this is probably not a surprise to everyone, if you look at the people who are scared of needles and who are not scared of needles, so scared is the blue bar and not scared the pink bar, you can see that the people who are scared of needles are way more likely also to experience these vasovagal reactions. So this is something that you keep seeing in the literature and that we also found in this group of non-donors. Now, of course, I was interested in the way that needle fear impacted health behavior. So I did a study, which is not published yet, where I asked around 250 people about the way that needle fear affected their health behavior. So these were 250 people who were scared of needles, and almost half of them says that it severely impacts their health behavior in several ways. For example, they delay or postpone a visit to a doctor or hospital even though they need it. They similarly avoid dentists. They even refuse treatment when they really need it. One anecdote that really stuck with me was a man who said that he was at the hospital and the surgeon said, "Oh, you have to go down to get some blood drawn for a blood test." And the patient said, "Okay," and he walked out of the hospital and never returned. So you can imagine that this can have very severe consequences. Also, 1 in 5 does not want to get vaccinated, which is of course not really a major problem. Maybe if that means you cannot go to the tropics, but now during a pandemic, this might be a much bigger problem. And also, they say that if they pursue treatment, it might fail altogether just because they cannot keep it up. And I also talked to around the same number of healthcare professionals from different areas in the hospital. And they also say that it is for them very adverse, this problem to experience. They describe feeling hopeless, powerless to help people that are scared. And so these are even the people that are able to make their way into a hospital, so who are not avoiders. They also say that sometimes by the time that an avoider joins or actually comes to the hospital, it might take a lot more or expensive or longer treatment to fix the problem that could have fixed easily in the first place. And also that the patient outcomes, therefore, are much worse in about 1/3 of the scared patients. And it also has an effect on the organization itself. So they say that a venipuncture takes, on average, 12 minutes, but the estimations can sometimes go up to 2 hours, and sometimes even after such a delay, they are unable to draw blood, so people would have to come back again. Also, just appointments take a lot longer because people need a lot more information or how do you say that? Reduction in I cannot get to the word, I'm sorry. And also consequently, a whole treatment plan might take a lot longer. Now, I think most of you are familiar with some of the strategies that at least blood banks have tried in trying to reduce vasovagal reactions. And you can sort of see that most of them have to do with physiological sort of symptom reduction, trying to replace the loss of half a liter of blood, trying to make sure that blood pressure doesn't drop, and also giving information, distraction, support, or changing the environment when they try to aim more at the psychological components. And this mapping these strategies and how effective they were, and mostly they are effective only in a small number of donors, I thought, okay, these are all either working on a very cognitive aspect, so giving information about fear, which is often very disconnected to actually experiencing fear, or they might come too late, because what people describe is that they are anxious or nervous before, and that they enter sort of either the donation or the needle related procedure already in such an anxious state that the distraction or the social support offered by the phlebotomist is not helpful anymore. And this sort of gave us the idea that maybe we should try to focus on the time points before the needle insertion. So when someone is alone, when maybe these anxiety problems or symptoms, and also like the slightly starting physical symptoms, might still be intervened on. So, of course, as a neuroscientist, I was interested in this process of the leading up to the panic and the leading up to the vasovagal response. What is behind it? What happens neurologically? And this also was guided by the background I have in my PhD, where I mostly looked at emotional experience, emotional expression, and how the brain and the body sort of work together in this way. And that work also made it very clear that people are very unable to express what they are feeling on time. So by the time they are aware of these processes, it's already too late. This is really an unconscious processing, very automatic processing that people don't have a lot of control over. Now, there will be some needles in the next slide, because I looked into the neuroscientific literature and I found only a few studies actually looking into this problem, and not even directly. So this is a study by Erson already back in 2007, and he decided to use needles as sort of a scary stimulus, and used oh no, I'm sorry, I'm saying it wrong, that's the other one. Erson tried to look at the effects of the rubber arm illusion, and this is actually something that we are also using in our study, so I'll talk about it a little bit more. But neuroscientists found a way to sort of trick the body into believing that a fake rubber arm is actually your own arm. And as you can see on the picture, there you see two arms. One is the participant's real arm on the bottom, and the other one is the fake arm above. And Erson used needles as a scary stimulus just to threaten this fake arm, just to see, you know, to what extent the brain responds to this threatening of the fake arm. And interestingly, I looked at the data having to do with the threatening. So with fMRI, you can compare different conditions. So when you threaten this arm with a needle, there are two areas that really become activated, which are the insula and the anterior cingulate cortex. So for those of you who don't know, the anterior cingulate cortex and the insula, they are very important when it comes to emotional processing, pain processing, anticipating pain, and sort of trying to figure out what happens into your own body and sort of the interoception. So even if you cognitively know that the arm that you know is being stung by this needle is fake, there's still a very strong response to this. Now, similarly, Lamb used needles also as sort of a scary stimulus. And they use this as a way to try to figure out how people respond to seeing pain in others. So people were watching videos of hands that were either tapped in between the fingers with needles, or they were stuck by a needle. And again, if you then compare these two conditions, you can see that the brain responds very strongly to to a needle that is actually being stuck into a thumb. And these are all areas, again, that have to do with the anticipation of pain, trying to see where it will hurt, how the body has to prepare for this, what it has to do with this. And interestingly, they also looked at how anxious people were. And then you could see that, especially again in these same two areas, the anterior cingulate cortex and the insula, the more anxious people were, the stronger the response was in these areas compared to needles. So it seems like the brain has a very strong reaction to even seeing needles, even when you know it's not you who is being threatened with this needle, or even when you know it's not even your real arm that is being threatened by this needle. And interestingly, these areas and also the other areas that were marked in these studies, they are also the ones responsible for the way that your body will react. So they sort of are the gateway and the instigators to the areas that have to do with trying to figure out, if the body should prepare for action, whether we should fight, flight, or freeze. So the autonomous nervous system. And I will talk about it a little bit more because I am reading especially the blood donor studies that were out there, where they looked at the vasovagal reactions more from a self-reported point of view. You could really see that there seems to be two sort of responses. So sometimes it is expressed, or explained that people become very activated, that the heart rate goes up, that they become flushed and sweaty, that they start to hyperventilate. But sometimes people show sort of an opposite pattern where they become pale, like their pallor changes, their temperature goes down, their heart rate variability goes down. Heart rate variability also being something having to do with emotional regulation or not being able to regulate your emotions very well, and dizziness. So it seems like there is more of a sympathetic component having to do with preparing for action, so maybe even trying to fight or flight, but also with the parasympathetic component having more to do with becoming withdrawn, with even resting in a way that is reminiscent of the not the fight, flight, or freeze response, but the faint response that is described also in animals or even in people undergoing high trauma or very bad trauma, where the body just completely withdraws. And there is a hypothesis that it actually helps you to avoid trauma, because if fighting or freezing or fleeing is not really an option anymore, you sort of have to give over. And also this makes the body less sensitive to pain. So this is sort of what I thought might be at work. And obviously it's a very a very strong reaction to something that is not actually life-threatening, such as needles. But there is not really a consensus yet on why this actually happens. But I did figure that maybe there are different also emotional processes therefore in play, because I noticed in the blood donation field that fear and stress and anxiety are sort of sometimes used as synonyms, as interchangeable, and they are not. They are very different processes with very different causes and very different reactions. So I figured maybe it's also important to try and figure out which emotional components are at work here, and if one of these is related to a certain type of bodily reaction. And furthermore, I wondered if there are personality deterministics that can sort of predict who will experience what. So does it matter if you're generally anxious, like the study before mentioned? Does it matter how you cope with adverse events or with your emotions? So this is actually how I sort of how I figured I would want to study this problem. And of course, then I hit the problem of how I was going to measure this. Because as I mentioned before, it is very difficult to measure emotional experience, because you often cannot really ask people because they're unable to tell you what is happening, or they will come up with a lot of cognitive explanations for what they are feeling. And in my research, I was used to using psychophysiological measurements, having to do with electrodes, and I also did fMRI research. And I realized that in a blood donation setting, these would be very burdensome. And also, if I really wanted to see if I could make something that could help people, I would have to stay away from all these very burdensome, expensive equipments that would never be able, that we could never use in a real life setting. So back in 2004, there was an article that used infrared thermal imaging that was, that is normally used for construction stuff. And, it sort of became clear that maybe infrared thermal imaging would be a nice way to measure psychophysiological reactions without having to use any contact methods like electrodes. So this study actually saw that if you startle people with a big, with a loud noise, then the blood draws away from the nose. So I decided to look more into this technique, and I thought, hey, this type of imaging can be very fruitful because you can literally see if someone becomes pale, if blood draws away from their face. You could even technically see if people start to sweat, because it's imaging. You can see emotional expressions in the face. And there were studies showing, you can see muscle activity with this. You can see if people are sweating, if they are breathing, and what their heart rate is. So this technique seemed very promising if you wanted to stay away from having to use all these different electrodes to measure all these different things and still not having emotional expressions. Also, another study looked at how promising it would be to use infrared thermal imaging in measuring stress. They looked at different areas in the face, but they also tried to relate it to heart rate, variability, and even cortisol measurements. So I thought, hey, this is a really cool technique. And also there was there is emerging research showing that experiencing or expressing emotions is actually associated with also very different patterns of heat in your face. Now, altogether, this led to a research project called FAINT. Sorry. I'm sorry, I was, someone knocked on my door. So this led to my research study called FAINT, which stands for Facial Infrared Thermal Imaging in the Prevention of Needle-Induced Fainting. And I did not have a background in artificial intelligence at the time, but I thought if we really want to do this in a way that is sustainable, I want to see if I can develop an artificial intelligence algorithm that can automatically detect very early symptoms of fear or fainting by looking at the imaging of the face. And I thought it would be very important to do this automatically because, previous neuroscience scientists had just manually annotated the data. And I thought, well, that is very nice for one study, but an algorithm would be way quicker. Maybe it would find patterns that we would not even think to look at. And of course, you might be able to use the algorithm in some sort of way. Now, of course, that led to the next question, which is, how am I going to get this data? I got actually a grant for this from the Dutch Foundation for Research called NWO. And with that money, I went to Tilburg University. And we decided to try to collect data in two types of ways. So one, we are still collecting with actual blood donors. So we are following donors throughout the donation procedure using both a regular thermal, like a regular camera, and infrared thermal imaging camera. We follow donors throughout the whole donation procedure, and we also, ask for personality things in questionnaires. We ask them to rate their subjective vasovagal reactions using the blood donation reaction inventory. And I mean, this is very nice. We're still collecting data. We have more, I think, around 150 or more donors included right now. We aim to get a 300. Of course, we're delayed a little bit because of COVID. But we are also using this aforementioned rubber arm illusion, and we use that at Tilburg University with students. Because of course donors are already sort of a biased group of people, and we thought it would be nice to sort of induce this experience of having a blood donation in not donors, which also helps us, of course, to do this in a setting where we are not allowed to actually do a venipuncture. So I want to show you how we do this with someone you know very well. Wait, now I have to. Okay. So as you can see, this is Barbara. We all know her very well. And a few years ago, she visited Sanquin, and we showed her this illusion. So on the right, you can see the video that Barbara is watching on the laptop right now. And Juditha is mimicking what Barbara is seeing on the screen on her own hand. And this is how the rubber arm, or in this case the virtual blood donation illusion works, because the brain is seeing and feeling exactly the same thing. Right now, Barbara's brain sort of incorporated this arm on the screen into her own body schema. And as you can see, she's watching, this needle just lying there. So this is sort of a nice anticipatory period where someone is knowing what is going to happen. They're looking at this needle. They feel like this arm is actually their arm. Now you see the phlebotomist is preparing the arm by rubbing it, which is again mimicked by Juditha. And right now, the needle is inserted. And I hope the audio works. In case it doesn't, Barbara said, this is weird. And so even as participants obviously realize that this is fake because they're looking at the computer screen, it works really well. So here, Barbara, I asked her how she's feeling, and she said it feels like blood is being drawn. And this is also, I tried this on a lot of colleagues, both Sanquin. I'll stop the video now. Both at Sanquin and Tilburg University, and of course we have the students, and people describe feeling the blood, the warmth of the blood, and really, feeling like they sort of underwent an actual blood donation. I'll quickly try to tell you something about the data. So of course these are videos, and what we're working on is a way to that the algorithm can automatically sort of both detect the outline of the face, establish different regions of interest on the forehead, the chin, the nose, the cheeks, the lip, that we found in previous literature that were important. And it extracts the warmth data, like the raw temperature data from these areas for basically every frame. Also we checked if the illusion worked. I don't think I explained that you can also create a control condition with this illusion by not stimulating the arm in synchronous, but doing it asynchronously. And then because the body doesn't see, or the brain doesn't see and feel the same, it's actually not incorporated. So the blue bars here, which are an indication of ownership, of to what extent the participants say that they actually felt this arm was theirs, should be different, because in the right, in the asynchronous condition, people should not actually feel like the arm is theirs as much as in the other condition. We actually didn't find that, so it seems like we did something wrong, or because of the anxiety of this having to do with needles, like we're not sure. People still felt like this arm was theirs in a way, a little bit less than in the real condition, but it was not significantly different. So we are going to repeat the study. So yeah, we're going to see if we find that again. And yeah, we're still, I mean, this is just data from 45 participants. We need a lot more to really look at this properly, and we're in the process of analyzing the donor data. So I hope next time I'll be able to tell you a little bit more about that. But we plotted the temperature fluctuations of all these regions of interest. And the 4 lines have to do with the people who are they say that they are scared of needles, and also in the synchronous versus the asynchronous condition. But also actually in the temperature reactions, we didn't find an effect of this condition. So I included this condition because I thought it might be important to see if it really is important that the arm is felt as yours. But it seems like, just as we found in that people found in the other fMRI studies, that merely seeing this happening can already be such a strong stimulus that it doesn't really matter if the arm was deemed more or less yours or not. And what we found actually is, if you relate this to the blood donation reaction inventory scores that people self-reported, that we find at least significant effects in the nose area. So it seems that we can predict sort of vasovagal reactions that people are experiencing through temperature fluctuations in the nose. And obviously, these also have to do with breathing. So actually, in the next study that we're planning now, and that we will do the moment that we can do it if the corona measurements are lifted, is not only repeat the study, but also include psychophysiological measurements, including heart rate and respiration, to see what exactly we are measuring here. Now, this is a video showing the algorithm because, as I said, we also use normal video data. And this is because AINAR is an app that works on your phone, and your phone doesn't have a thermal imaging camera. But in theory, and this has been shown before, but it's quite novel, you should be able to measure a proxy of these heat maps and the heart rate and respiration just from normal RGB imaging. And so this is what we are working on right now. So we're not only making an algorithm that is able to assess the infrared thermal imaging, but also just regular face data. And it works approximately the same. So the algorithm tracks your face, and it looks at the red, green, and blue channels in the face. And yeah, we are trying to measure both, changes in pallor, changes in breathing, and changes in heart rate, or in heat or warmth in your face that we are using in AINAR. And the idea is, and I'll talk a bit more about that, is that this algorithm will feed into AINAR. But I will tell you more about that, because what AINAR is a biofeedback game. Playing? Yes, there we go. So you can download AINAR, by the way, on the Google Play stores and the iPhone stores. And we decided to already just develop the game as much as possible, just so that we can co-develop the game itself and the algorithm. So we're improving both. But the idea is that the algorithm is directly controlling the colors in the game. And as a player, you have 2 tasks. You have to finish the puzzle by coloring in the gray areas with your finger. But also, you have to make sure that the colors stay blue. And now, if the algorithm picks up signs of, maybe an increasing heart rate, or that you become pale, or, the exact patterns we're going to have to figure out in our own research. So we're working on that. The colors turn red. And if you see that the colors turn red, this is an indirect warning to you that you should just try to make the colors blue again. And in doing so, you are indirectly changing your autonomous nervous system response. So the idea is that this game is going to measure whether you become scared or anxious, or whether you're going to have a vasovagal reaction before you are actually aware of it. And by using this biofeedback mechanism, you can learn how to prevent them and control them. And we didn't come up with this biofeedback mechanism. This is actually something that has been around since, I think, the 70s, and that works really well. Because I cannot ask you, for example, to change your heart rate or your brain waves or your muscle activity patterns, because these are all automatic processes that you are not aware of. And similarly, these anxiety and vasovagal processes are also very unconscious, and you're not aware of them in early stages. But if you can measure them and visualize them, people can learn how to control the visualization of it. And this is a way to sort of get control over these physiological responses. So this is how we got to AINAR. The idea is that this is a way that people can, in a very playful way, prevent and control these anxiety symptoms, the starting vasovagal reactions, and prevent them before they escalate. Another nice complementary quality of AINAR as compared to the other strategies out there is that you can play it independently of anyone else. So you can be alone in a waiting room and you can play AINAR. So you don't have to wait until there's a nice nurse to distract you or to comfort you. Also, you can do this before your blood pressure drops, so that the applied muscle tension. You can do that later. It is very playful, and one of the major advances of biofeedback is that it teaches you what works for you, because I can teach you a certain meditation strategy or relaxation practice something, but it might not work for you. And what is good for you is sometimes very difficult to even put into words. So the game will teach you what works for you in a very automatic, unconscious way. And so far, already thousands of people have helped us to get this far. And with every iteration of both the game and the algorithm, we hope that people are playing it, telling us what we need to improve, if it works or not. And yeah, I hope in the next year or so we can further develop AINAR. So actually, if you are willing to collaborate with us on this, we are already working with several healthcare organizations to not only collect more data with actual patients, for example, or to test the game and to further improve the game with healthcare professionals. If you think this is interesting, I would like to collaborate in any way, let me know. Let us know. You can check our website, also ainar.io. And of course, this is also a thank you to the team that is also working on AINAR, which are Dr. Mart Jansen from Sanquin and Dr. Sharon Ong and Professor Eric Posma from Tilburg University. They're all part of the PhD committee of Juditha. So please, keep us in mind. We hope to start publishing as soon as possible. We're working really hard on analyzing the data that we're getting in right now. And also thank you, by the way, to Hasti Memazadeh, who is collecting all this data with donors. Without her, we would be nowhere. So I hope you enjoyed this presentation. I'm sorry for the few chaotic parts in between. And please contact me if there are questions. And I'll talk to you in the Q&A. Bye.